At times, Dead by Daylight can be very challenging, and I'm sure you're always looking for new ways to improve your gameplay. In today's video, we are going to be telling you guys some mistakes that you potentially could be making and how to correct them to instantly become a better DBD player. Let's go ahead and jump on into the list. Starting off at number 1 is that your perk builds don't have good synergy. Synergizing perks, if you don't know what that means, is making sure that all 4 of the perks that you're bringing into the trial will work together to give you that nice advantage versus not working together at all, or even in times working against each other. Let me give you an example of a perk build that is not going to work in your favor, and it could have pretty bad synergy. If you're running something like Sprint Burst and Dead Hard together, this completely counters each other. Sprint Burst, upon use, as soon as you're not exhausted, will make you exhausted. Because you are exhausted, you'll never have an opportunity to use Dead Hard, thus making that perk spot invalid, and it's not really having good synergy. A more standard build or something that you might be running is something that just doesn't work well together. It can just be a bunch of different random perks. Let's go with Self-Care, Sprint Burst, Iron Will, and Urban Evasion. These are all just random perks across the board, and nothing really works together to help each other out. Here's how we can pick apart this build and make some things that work better together. If you're running something like Self-Care, you can easily run a Boon Totem to increase your healing speed, or you can even run something like Bite the Bullet to make it so that when you are healing, you're healing silently. For something like Sprint Burst, you could potentially run a perk like Vigil to quickly recharge your exhaustion perk again much faster instead of waiting the 40 seconds to use Sprint Burst again. That essentially is what having good synergy is, and there's tons and tons of different perk builds that really work together and have great synergy. In order to make a good perk build in DBD, what you want is to have 1 exhaustion perk and then 3 perks that work very well together. In my standard build, I run Sprint Burst as my exhaustion perk. I also pop Adrenaline on just for the end game so you can instantly heal and of course get that speed boost. And then I run Bite the Bullet in order to heal and nobody hears me and off the record. This makes it so that when I'm injured, the killer won't know where I'm at. So with that build in mind, the way it works for me is that whenever a killer hits me, I will normally have my Sprint Burst ready to go at 99%. This way, as soon as I stop walking for 1 second, my Sprint Burst is ready to go. I'll use the boost that I get from the hit and then combine it with a Sprint Burst to try to get into a safe corner. Off the record will make it so that I have no blood, and then I instantly start healing with a med kit or if I'm in a Boon Totem, and then chances are the killer is gonna eventually lose me. In times where the gen is there's just 1 more gen left to go, Adrenaline might pop into play, or if the killer does end up finding me, Adrenaline might pop into play if we're at that late stages of the game and the build altogether works well. You want to make sure that all of your perks synergize well. I'll leave some good builds on screen right now for you to take a look at, and you can run these in all of your games. Speaking of bringing items, that takes us to our next point of not bringing items. When I first started playing DBD, I like to hoard my items and make sure that I had a lot of excess in flashlights and medkits, and I didn't want to use my ultra rare offerings, things like that. But the issue with that is that you never eventually get to use them. With so much blood points already being poured into DBD and the grind being reduced so much, now is the best time to bring items into your trial to help you out. If you're bringing just a med kit to heal yourself or others, a toolbox to work on generators way faster, or even a flashlight to blind the killer and get some saves, I encourage you to do that. Any little item will help you a lot more in DBD, and this is your way to combating some of the killers. Or even if you are playing as killer, it's a good way to keep an eye out for what survivor you need to prioritize. So bring items in your trials, put some good add-ons to those items as well, and get some good use out of them. Don't hoard them, there's no point, because you'll constantly be replenishing your supply. So bring those items in the game, and then you can even use that with our first tip, which is bringing in good perks, to bring the item that's best suited for your gameplay. So if you are bringing something like Self-Care, or if you're bringing something like Botany Knowledge, or a Boon Totem, bring a med kit. If you're working on things to make gens go faster, bring a toolbox. If you are just going to be that person that's in the killer's face, you can bring a flashlight. But bring items in the trials because it'll help you quite a lot. Our next tip is a classic one. I see so much people that do this to this day, and it really hinders their gameplay so much. This is probably the #1 most important thing. So we talked about all the stuff in the previous before you even jump on into the game. Now you're in the game. make sure you're looking behind you while you're running. If you're not doing this, what ends up happening is that the killer can easily mind game you, cut you off in different locations. You might not be paying attention, just running away, and then you run straight into the killer. Practice looking behind you when you're running. You can hold the S key on the keyboard and using your mouse to turn yourself around, or just moving your fingers in the opposite directions when you're playing on a controller. Practice doing this and understand what the environment in front of you is going to look like, so you can look behind you and see where the killer is going. This is especially good when you're looping, because what ends up happening is that if the killer decides to mind game you or hide their red stain and you're not paying attention, you'll easily run into them and give them a free hit. So make sure you are practicing looking behind you, because it helps significantly. That takes us to our next part on the list. While you're running, you're learning your thing, make sure you're not wasting those pallets. Instead, even in some situations, you might want to take the hit. I see a lot of people that instantly take a hit from the killer and drop the pallet if they're close to it. This is a big mistake as well. When you take a hit, you get a big speed boost from that. So what you want to do is to run to a different part of the map with more pallets, more assets to help you. Don't waste the pallet. Your pallets are the only ways of countering the killers, right next to the vaults, of course, but this is your #1 source of countering them. So make sure you're saving these pallets, especially towards the end game and for the rest of your teammates, and if you don't need to use them, don't use them. The only times you want to drop these pallets are when the killer has like Bloodlust 3 or you're about to die on hook, things like that. Use the pallets when you're guaranteed to about to take a hit and then drop it. That's the only method of using these pallets. You don't want to just drop them all willy-nilly. Instead, loop around them a little bit. Don't waste them when you don't need to. And you might even be able to go to a vault or a different location if you take a hit, or just in general to not waste those pallets. And especially do not waste the Killer Shack pallet. The amount of loops that you can get multiple times from the Killer Shack is very, very, very strong. So do not waste the Killer Shack pallet. Don't just drop it while you're running by, because it's going to be a nice pallet for you later on. Our next tip for you is to be aware while you're doing generators, and this comes in a lot of different capacities. For example, if you're working on a generator and you hear the killer's heartbeat, don't be frantic and run away from the generator. You might even miss a skill check if you do that. Instead, pay attention to your surroundings. Sometimes the killers might be chasing someone right next to you, and you can continue working on that generator because chances are they're gonna commit to that chase. And other times, you might be able to look in the bottom left-hand corner to the obsession, see if those bars are moving, and if they are, it means the killer is chasing the obsession, so you can carry on working on your generator. A different situation is where you hear nothing. If you're hearing nothing and you're working on a generator, it could mean that there is a stealthy killer around. It could be a Ghostface or a Myers that might pop up on you or be charging up their power on you, so make sure you are looking around. A killer can also run a perk such as Tinkerer to know exactly where your location is and then catch you off guard. So make sure you're constantly looking around. This will give you information on whether to commit to a gen or to run away, but it'll give you information nonetheless, which is vital in DBD. Speaking about generators, make sure you are not 3-genning yourself. 3-genning is essentially making 3 generators in walking distance of the killer, all 3 of them being very, very close to each other. So when you start the trial, you need 5 gens. You might just run out, pop a gen, go to the next one, keep on going until there's 1 generator remaining to pop. When there's 1 generator remaining to pop, that means that there's 3 active generators on the map for you to work on. However, in certain situations, those 3 remaining generators might be right next to each other. This lets the killer just kind of walk in a triangle formation, looking at all 3 of these generators, and it's really hard to get any progress done because they're all right there. Instead, you want to force the killer to walk across the map or somewhere out of line of sight of the other generator so that you can have enough time to work on these gens. A lot of the times, this can lead to your downfall as a survivor, and this will change the entirety of the game if you make this happen. It's very rare that you will be able to beat a 3-gen, especially against a really strong killer, so make sure you're paying attention to what generators are being popped. You don't want to put yourself in that situation because it is mightily hard to beat it. Sticking on the category of generators, the next tip is to make sure you're constantly working on those gens and you're not really doing other things. A lot of the times when I'm playing, I see survivors that are either constantly booning totems, moving around, or looking for new items, or just walking around all willy-nilly. Time is of the essence. You need to be working on these generators, especially when someone is being chased, because if you allow them to get chased, get down, then you or somebody else has to go and save them, which means 2 people are not working on generators. If that's the case and then the killer goes back, let's just say hypothetically they knock one person down, then they're actively chasing another person. While that person's on the floor and one other person's being chased because it is, somebody else needs to go to pick up the person from the ground or potentially try to help the other person that is being chased, leaving all but one person working on a generator. Especially in solo queue, there might even be some miscommunications and all 2 of you might try to go help the same person. When this happens, the killer has everything going in their favor. One person's down, 2 people are trying to heal them, and they're chasing someone completely different. Nobody's on generators, giving them more time to chase and to hook. And then the cycle repeats. As soon as you guys get that person up, they get the person down, they put them on a hook, and rinse and repeat. You're like, hey, I'm already here, let me just go for the save. And that is what leads to a team's downfall, the over-altruistic gameplay, and not working on generators instead. You want to constantly work on those generators. Even if someone is on the hook or on the ground, you have time to work on that generator, especially if they have hook states that they can give up. You have a good amount of time from when the person is initially placed on the hook to get some good progress on a generator and then go in for the save. You don't want them to lose another state on the hook, so keep it in mind and how far you can get and if the killer is camping, what to do. But you don't have to immediately run in for the save. You can take your time, work on the generators instead of doing other things, and then later on in the game, when there's only 1 or 2 generators, you can then do all the other tasks that you might need to do, such as a boon or getting a totem, getting your rift challenge, etc. If you allow the killer to have that snowballing effect at the start of the match, it's going to be really difficult to combat later on. And speaking about being over-altruistic, that is our next tip. Do not be over-altruistic because it will lead to your downfall. This kind of rubber bands off of what we just spoke about. Essentially, this means if you're constantly going for saves, or going for saves when it's not necessary or you can't get it done, you're being over-altruistic and you might be throwing the game. For example, if there's a Leatherface just in the basement looking at somebody at the start of the game, don't go for them. Work on the generators instead. Sure, you might end up losing a teammate, but you won't end up losing the entirety of the game for this. If the killer wants to camp, they want to stick around, don't put your own self at risk and allow them to get another down or another hook, potentially killing everybody because you want to be over-altruistic. If someone's running in for a save, they get down, don't go chasing after them trying to save both people. The kill will just down you as well, and then the snowballing will just leave it to one person, which would be incredibly difficult, especially with the new thing that's coming out. If they manage to get you down, then that's pretty much a GG. Do not be over-altruistic. Know how much you can leverage and don't overextend, or else it will cost you your game. And our final thing on things that you're not doing right is not identifying those killer perks. You want to make sure that you are identifying them. We'll have a full-on video telling you how you can identify most killers' perks, the most common ones that you'll see. But essentially, what you want to do is to try to figure out what the killer is doing. For example, if you see a killer running around and breaking a pallet really quickly by stomping on it, chances are they have brutal strength. If you drop a pallet on their head and you see that their stun is really fast, it means they have enduring. With these things in mind, you can identify what the killer has and then kind of formulate what they're going to try to do. For example, if they do have enduring, chances are they have spared fury. Meaning, if you drop a pallet on them the next time you do it, the pallet is going to instantly break. So keep that in mind and then change your gameplay to adapt to that. Now, the next time they're coming to take a hit on the pallet, instead of dropping it so it hits them, drop it a little bit early. That way, 2 of their perks are not going to be utilized. Another example is if you're working on a generator, you're about 70% done, and all of a sudden you hear no heartbeat. It means that the killer has a perk like Tinkerer. They're going to be coming to your location with no heartbeat and might be able to surprise you. Keep that in mind. You might want to keep generators at 60, 65, get them all to there, and then pop multiple gens to 70 or 80. That way the killer is forced to choose a location and they can't constantly gatekeep that one generator. Identifying the killer's perks will help you tremendously because you'll know how to counter their playstyle and their gameplay. This is going to take a little bit more time and experience to understand what killer perks are and what they do. We'll have a full video dedicated to both survivor and killer side of this, so keep that in mind for the future. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is all of the tips that we have for you guys today on things that I see a lot of players doing incorrectly. And by correcting these actions, you can improve your gameplay drastically. I hope all of this made sense and you understood all of it. and put these into your games because it'll definitely help. If you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below, subscribe for some more DBD content. We have tons of other tutorials that we're working on for you guys. I figured I'd dip my toes back into the tutorial scene because there's a lot of new players in DBD and I want to help you guys understand the game a little bit more. With that being said though, I've been your host, The King. As always, I tip my crown to you guys. Make sure you follow us on Twitch and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the vlog.
Life like a king, gold on my neck, boy, gold on my rings. Crown got the tilt, I ain't worried about a ting here. Flow so new, but I'm acting like I've been here. Yeah, see, this what I've been doing since the drop. Fire on the arrow when I tell them all.